The ocean air hung still over Saipan. It was the summer of 1944, and the island was quiet for once. No gunfire echoed, no planes droned overhead, just the distant surf, the rustle of palm trees, and the low hum of radar screens glowing inside a darkened American control room. Inside the makeshift Air Operations Center, young radar operators sat hunched over their screens. Their fingers moved slowly, precisely. Eyes scanned for flickers. The new radar system was still new to many of them, and they treated it like a living thing. Some believed it could sense moods. Others said it only worked when you were calm. But all of them knew it was their only window into the night sky. Suddenly, one of the screens pulsed. A faint echo, then a stronger one. A blip, then another. It was moving fast, high, and silent. A voice crackled over the intercom. Unidentified aircraft, bearing 280, altitude 12,000, closing fast. No one said it out loud, but they all knew what it was. A Japanese bomber, probably a Mitsubishi G4M. The Americans called them Bettys. They were fast, dangerous, and came at night like ghosts. Scrambling on the airstrip nearby, a crew raced toward a strange black aircraft. Its twin engines were already spinning. Its long nose housed a radar dish. Its wings held for cannons, and its name matched its color, Black Widow. The P-61 lifted off without ceremony. No crowds, no fanfare, just moonlight reflecting off its canopy as it climbed into the sky. Above the Pacific, the night was empty. No stars, no clouds, just darkness. The pilot kept his hands steady. Beside him, the radar operator leaned into a scope, tracking the blip. "There he is," the operator whispered, 10 miles ahead. "He has no idea we're here." The Black Widow was flying without lights, engines muffled, paint dark as coal. From the outside, it was invisible, but from the inside, it was a hunter. And tonight, it had found its prey. The crew sat in silence, each second stretched. The Betty was still flying straight. No evasive turns, no sign it even suspected a threat. At 5 miles, the pilot flipped his safety off. The guns were ready. Then, at 2 miles, the radar lock firmed. The P-61 eased into firing range. They had practiced this moment dozens of times, but this was real. The first time, and there would be no second chance. "Target acquired," the operator said. The pilot nodded. Engaging. 650 caliber machine guns and 4 20mm cannons opened fire. The sky lit up like a flash of lightning. Tracers streaked into the night. In a blink, the Betty exploded in midair, flames falling like lanterns into the jungle below. Back at base, the radar screen went still. The blip disappeared. The room was quiet again, but nothing was the same. The Black Widow had struck, and for the first time in history, an aircraft had hunted and killed using radar alone. Night had a new ruler, the birth of a phantom fighter. It began with a problem, a deadly one. By 1940, the war in Europe had shown the world a terrifying truth. Air raids didn't stop at sunset. The German Luftwaffe flew bombing missions under the cover of darkness. British cities burned while their defenders could only guess where the next attack would come from. In America, military planners were watching closely. If the war ever reached the Pacific or the American coast, how would they fight back at night? The answer, they believed, was a new kind of aircraft. One that could see in the dark. One that didn't need the sun. One that could find and fight enemies using something completely new radar. But building such a plane was easier said than done. The Army Air Forces sent out a call. They wanted a night fighter. Fast, long range, heavily armed, able to fly high and low. And most importantly, they wanted it equipped with the new SCR-720 radar system. Something that could detect enemy planes in total darkness. Northrop Aircraft answered that call. A small company by industry standards, Northrop didn't have the size of Boeing or Lockheed, but it had ideas, and one of them would become the Black Widow. The proposed aircraft was strange from the start. Twin engines, a crew of 3, pilot, gunner, and radar operator. It looked bulky, even ugly to some, and it was massive, heavier than a B-25 bomber. Critics said it would be too slow, too hard to handle, but Jack Northrop believed in his team. They didn't just build a plane, they built a weapon designed for the shadows. At the heart of it was the radar. Tucked into the nose, the dish scanned the sky ahead. It could detect a single plane up to 6 miles away in pitch blackness. The radar operator sat behind the pilot, guiding the approach. Like a hunter following footprints, the Black Widow tracked its target long before anyone could see it. The rest of the design was just as lethal. 4 20mm cannons sat under the fuselage. 4 50 caliber machine guns were housed in a remote-controlled top turret. All could be fired in bursts or together. When they did, the sound was like tearing metal, and the results were devastating. It was painted entirely black. No reflective surfaces, just deep, ghost-like darkness. At night, it blended in with the sky. By 1943, the prototypes were flying. Test pilots were surprised at how responsive it felt. It climbed faster than expected, handled better than its size suggested, and with its armament and radar, it didn't need to see the enemy, only needed to find them. The military gave it a name worthy of its silent power: the Black Widow. Like the spider, it was deadly, and like the spider, it hunted in the dark. The stage was set. The plane was ready. All it needed was a target. Darkness clung to the jungle airfields of the Pacific, thick as molasses and humming with the nervous breath of mechanics and flight crews. In a quiet corner of Saipan, the first operational P-61 Black Widows began preparing for their missions. Sleek, black, and eerily silent when idling, the aircraft didn't just look different. It felt different. The men who stood beneath its looming twin booms often whispered the word "ghost" under their breath. It wasn't fear, it was awe. They'd never seen a night fighter like this. On the night of June 30th, 1944, the waiting ended. Lieutenant Dale Haberman and his radar operator, Lieutenant Raymond Mooney, were assigned their first patrol. Their orders were simple: intercept any enemy aircraft attempting to harass U.S. positions on Saipan. But this wasn't a normal intercept. This was to be the debut of a weapon no one had seen in action before. The Black Widow would fly, search, and kill, all under the cover of complete darkness. As they climbed into the humid sky, the island disappeared beneath them, swallowed by the sea of black. The P-61's onboard radar, housed in its nose cone, began its quiet sweep of the skies. It emitted no visible signal, no warning, just a pulse in the darkness. And then, a blip, 100 miles out, low and slow. An enemy reconnaissance plane, perhaps a Nakajima C-6N or a Mitsubishi Ki-46, slipping in to report on troop movement. It was their prey. Haberman and Mooney moved without words. The Black Widow's 4 20mm cannons and 4 50 caliber machine guns were loaded and ready. As the twin engines purred, the pilots closed in, the radar guiding them ever closer through clouds and moonless skies. They never saw the enemy pilot's face. He never saw theirs. The Black Widow struck from behind and below, a sudden burst of fire lighting the night like a flashbulb, then vanishing into blackness again. The Japanese plane went down in flames. There was no dogfight, no chase, just silence before and silence after. When they returned to base, no fanfare waited for them, no medals, no radio announcements, just the quiet nods of the ground crew and a line in the mission log: "First radar-directed kill by P-61, confirmed." But everyone who read that log knew what had changed. For the first time in military aviation history, a fighter had hunted and killed entirely by radar. In the dead of night, without visual contact, the sky had become a different battlefield. In that moment, the Black Widow proved it wasn't just another aircraft. It was a shift in philosophy. Speed, firepower, and skill were no longer enough. From now on, war in the air would belong to those who could see without being seen. And the Black Widow, gliding back into the jungle shadows without a single spotlight to guide her, was the first to claim that throne. The reports filtered in slowly, confused and fragmentary. Japanese reconnaissance units and bomber crews whispered of an invisible killer. Some claimed their comrades had vanished mid-flight with no sign of gunfire or pursuit. Others spoke of strange flashes in the sky, followed by silence. The Americans, it seemed, had developed a night phantom. The impact was immediate. Japanese commanders, already stretched thin, defending across the vast Pacific theater, now had to account for a new threat, one they couldn't predict, couldn't outrun, and couldn't see. Before the Black Widow, nighttime raids were relatively low risk. U.S. air defenses struggled in the dark. But now, any aircraft daring to fly over Allied territory after sunset did so at their own peril. Radar was not entirely new, but the idea of mounting it on a dedicated night fighter, one that could independently hunt and kill, was a terrifying prospect for Japanese aviators. The Black Widow's crew didn't rely on ground instructions. They didn't wait to be told where to fly. They prowled the sky themselves, scanning the night with unseen eyes. Word of the P-61's capabilities began spreading among American troops as well. On islands like Saipan, Tinian, and later Iwo Jima, soldiers resting in foxholes would look up and feel comforted by the sound of its engines. The low hum of the twin Pratt & Whitney radials became a lullaby of safety. "The Widow's out tonight," they'd say. "We're covered." Back at the squadron level, more units received P-61s as quickly as production allowed. Pilots trained feverishly to understand the onboard radar systems. It wasn't easy. The technology was delicate, the interface unfamiliar. It took coordination between pilot and radar operator, each trusting the other blindly. But when it worked, when everything clicked, they became hunters unlike anything the sky had seen. One mission report from the 6th Night Fighter Squadron told of a Black Widow intercepting a Japanese bomber more than 70 miles from base, engaging it at an altitude above 20,000 feet. The crew described the target as vaporized before it ever saw us. That single phrase became legend. Vaporized before it saw us. That was the future of air combat. And so, the panic spread. Japanese pilots began refusing certain missions after dark. Morale dipped. Commanders scrambled for countermeasures, but nothing they had could match the radar tech now mounted on these Night Stalkers. While the sun still gave them hope, the night had turned into a hunting ground, and the Black Widow was king of it. The island of Saipan now throbbed with activity. Runways pulsed with roaring engines. Crates of ammunition clanked in the back of jeeps, and in a darkened hangar on the northern edge of the base, a young radar operator adjusted a glowing green screen, marking another target blip on his scope. The Black Widow wasn't just flying patrols anymore. It was hunting every single night. Word of its success had reached the highest levels of command. With each confirmed interception, confidence in the aircraft grew. Pilots who had been skeptical now vied for a chance to crew it. Technicians scrambled to keep the radar systems functional in the salt-thick air. It wasn't just about defending islands anymore. It was about pushing outward, clearing the skies so the next wave of U.S. bombers could strike deeper into the heart of Japan's empire. It was on one of these nights that the Black Widow gained a new nickname among those who watched from below: Red Fire. The name came from what the ground crews saw when the aircraft opened up its weapons during a nighttime intercept. The 20mm cannons and 50 caliber machine guns created a concentrated flash, like a furnace bursting open in the sky, just for a moment, then gone. The story of that name came from a mission over Guam. A lone Japanese twin-engine bomber was spotted heading toward Allied ships offshore. A Black Widow lifted off to intercept. The radar locked on quickly. Within minutes, the fighter crept behind the unsuspecting bomber, climbing to its altitude and matching its speed in the dark. The radar operator gave the word. The pilot squeezed the trigger. A blaze of red fire lit the night. The enemy plane exploded mid-air, debris cascading like fireworks into the ocean. There were no survivors, but back at the base, soldiers watching from the hills had seen the entire thing. Just that flash, then silence. One of them muttered, "It looked like hell opened up." And from that night on, the name stuck. Red Fire. The Japanese had no answer to this kind of threat. Their fighters were not equipped to fly or fight in the dark. Their bombers became easy prey. Every mission after sunset became a gamble with death. Some Japanese squadrons even began changing their schedules, opting to fly at dawn or dusk instead, just to avoid running into a Black Widow's radar-guided claws. Inside the P-61 cockpits, the crews grew more confident. They learned how to read the subtle shifts in radar pings. They developed quiet, fast hand signals. Some even added little chalk marks inside the fuselage, one for each kill. Yet none of it was brash. These weren't showboats. They were shadows. Their victories often went unseen, their names rarely known beyond their own units. Still, for every kill, every silent interception, the legend of the Black Widow grew. It had gone from an experimental design to a psychological weapon. Not only could it destroy enemy aircraft, it made them fear the dark. And in war, fear was power. But no weapon goes unchallenged for long. By late 1944, Japanese high command had begun assembling intelligence reports from surviving crewmen. Patterns were forming. The Americans had a new night fighter, and it was eating up patrol routes across Saipan, Guam, and the Marianas. Though few had seen it clearly, descriptions aligned: twin boom design, black paint, glowing radar dish, sudden bursts of fire. They called it the Night Devil. In response, the Japanese experimented with new tactics. Some bombers flew lower, hoping to stay under radar detection. Others flew erratic zigzag patterns. A few were sent with decoy flares, crude attempts to confuse American gunners. But nothing worked reliably. The P-61's radar didn't care if a plane was flying high, low, straight, or crooked. It hunted by signature. If you were in range, it saw you. Even more troubling for Japan was that some of their own radar installations started picking up strange signals. It wasn't enemy bombers or traditional patrols, it was Black Widows circling offshore, mapping their movements, preparing strikes. The hunter had become a scout. The Americans had turned night into a tactical advantage. Back at the U.S. air bases, new crews continued rotating in. The training had become more efficient, the radar systems more reliable. Night interceptions rose dramatically. In one 10-day period, a single P-61 unit downed 9 enemy aircraft without losing a single plane. The numbers alone didn't tell the full story, but they signaled something chilling to Japan. Their night airspace no longer belonged to them. Japanese pilots began adapting the only way they could, with desperation. Kamikaze attacks increased, especially during twilight hours when the Black Widow patrols hadn't yet taken to the sky. These suicide missions were terrifying and deadly, but they were also a sign of shrinking options. If you couldn't win in the air, maybe you could die in the attempt. And for the Widow crews, it was a reminder that even supremacy in the dark didn't guarantee safety. One night over Peleliu, a Black Widow team reported detecting not 1, but 3 enemy aircraft inbound, a small squadron. They engaged, firing from behind as usual. But instead of fleeing, the lead Japanese pilot turned straight into them, guns blazing. It was a suicide run. The Widow took heavy damage, limped back to base, one engine sputtering. They survived. Barely. It was a new kind of warfare now. Less predictable, more brutal. Still, the Black Widow held the edge. It was fast, smart, and deadly. And more than that, it made the enemy change. In war, few weapons ever earn that kind of respect. In the darkness over Belgium, the sky was silent at least to the human ear. But in the cramped cockpit of a P-61 Black Widow, glowing shapes crept across a green radar screen. Lieutenant Dale Biz and his radar operator leaned in. Somewhere ahead, a German bomber was flying blind, unaware it was being hunted by a machine that didn't need daylight. The Black Widow's onboard SCR-720 radar scanned forward like a lighthouse in the night, revealing blips invisible to the naked eye. It was a game changer. While other Allied pilots relied on moonlight or luck, the P-61 turned night into a map of moving targets. No longer did German bombers enjoy the cover of darkness. They were being watched from beyond visual range. The aircraft strategy was simple, but revolutionary. The radar operator in the rear seat would guide the pilot toward a contact. As the blip grew larger and moved to the center of the scope, the pilot knew he was closing in. When it vanished from the screen just a few hundred feet away, it was time to engage. That night, the blip faded. Outside the canopy, a shadow moved across the clouds. Then came the staccato roar of 4 20mm cannons under the fuselage. Tracers lit up the sky like red needles in velvet. A sudden burst, a dull explosion. Flames tumbled downward in slow motion as the German bomber fell apart. No words were exchanged over the intercom. Only breathing, only silence. As they turned for base, Dale's co-pilot muttered, "He never saw us coming." That was the point. The P-61 was not designed to chase. It was built to ambush. Word spread fast. German bomber crews began reporting attacks from unseen enemies. Some swore they were being stalked by phantoms. There was no radio chatter, no warning shots, just a sudden eruption in the night sky followed by silence. The Luftwaffe began losing aircraft, not to dogfights, but to ghosts. The Black Widow became more than a plane. It was a presence, a shadow that hovered in the minds of German crews long before it ever showed up on radar. In early 1945, Berlin still pulsed with stubborn confidence. Despite Allied bombing and the Red Army's approach from the east, Nazi propaganda kept the population marching. One of their loudest voices came from a radio station deep in the city, a key target for the Allies. High command needed to silence it. Not with bombs dropped from 20,000 feet, but with precision. They turned to the P-61. Flying from bases in Belgium to Black Widows took off under cloud cover. Their target, the transmission towers of the Berlin Broadcast Center. Their timing had to be perfect. One missed pass, and German flak would tear them from the sky. Inside the lead aircraft, Captain James Howell gripped the controls. His radar operator tracked their approach tall spires, barely visible through the overcast. Berlin's anti-aircraft guns, already exhausted from weeks of daylight raids, hadn't expected a precision night strike. That was their mistake. With pinpoint guidance, Howell brought the aircraft in low. Just above the rooftops, the twin engines hummed like a sewing machine. The broadcast towers came into view tall, skeletal, and glowing in the moonlight. The Black Widow didn't have a bomb bay, but it did have underwing bombs and gun pods. Howell let loose. The towers shimmered for a moment, then crumpled like scaffolding in a windstorm. One final burst from the cannon ensured the signal wouldn't come back. In minutes, the Widows were gone. No sirens, no warning. Just two ghosts slicing through the sky. The next morning, Berlin woke to static. No broadcast, no rallying voice, just silence. For the first time, the Nazi war machine realized that nowhere, not even the heart of the Reich, was safe at night. By spring 1945, the night skies over Germany had become haunted. What once gave the Luftwaffe the advantage, darkness, now offered no protection. Reports from returning crews grew frantic. Their bombers were being picked off, not in open combat, but from the shadows. It felt like the enemy had eyes where no man should see. Inside his Berlin office, Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring listened to yet another frustrated briefing. Radar-equipped Allied fighters were slipping past his night defenses. His own night fighters were too slow, too blind, too few. The vaunted German radar network had been outclassed. In his fury, he reportedly smashed a porcelain model of a Junkers bomber against the wall. The source of that rage was a twin-boomed aircraft so strange that many German pilots did not recognize it until it was too late. They called it the Black Devil. Others whispered Batwing, but its official name was P-61 Black Widow, and it had turned the night into a trap. In one encounter over the Ruhr, a formation of Heinkel He-111s was returning from a supply drop when one of them simply vanished. The pilot in the next aircraft spotted a strange silhouette out of the corner of his eye, then a flash, then nothing. When the squadron landed, two planes were missing. No flak, no warning. Just precision death. German night fighters were scrambled, but they were using outdated tactics. Some relied on ground radar. Others used visual spotting under moonlight. None had the airborne reach or radar clarity of the Widow. Often, by the time they saw their enemy, they were already targeted. As the Allies advanced deeper into Germany, the P-61 widened its hunt. It did not seek glory in daytime dogfights. It worked alone or in pairs, flying long sorties along expected bomber routes or enemy staging corridors. Each mission was a trap waiting to be sprung. In his post-war memoir, a Luftwaffe night pilot described the Widow like a ghost. It was not there, and then it was. He wrote, "There were no lights, no noise, just a sudden tearing of metal behind you." Göring's pride in the Luftwaffe had long since turned to desperation. His fighters were being outflown, outgunned, and now outseen. The very idea that American crews could see in the dark better than his own was a humiliation. He demanded countermeasures, new radar units, faster night fighters, infrared systems, but it was too late. The Widow had already turned the tide. When the war ended in 1945, the P-61 Black Widow faded from headlines. But it left behind a trail of innovation that reshaped the future of air combat. It had done something no aircraft had ever done before. It brought the night under control. Its combination of speed, firepower, and airborne radar changed the way militaries thought about warfare after dark. No longer was night a time for retreat or waiting. Now, it was a time to strike. In total, the Black Widow scored over 120 confirmed kills in both the European and Pacific theaters. It shot down everything from bombers and fighters to buzz bombs and reconnaissance planes. But its greatest contribution wasn't the number of victories, it was the fear it inspired. Enemy crews knew they were not alone, even when their eyes told them otherwise. That psychological edge, the silent pressure of being watched and hunted, changed morale in a way that bombs never could. After the war, many P-61s were scrapped or sold, their missions classified, their stories buried under the drama of bigger battles and louder headlines. But for those who flew them, the memories remained sharp. Veterans recalled the eerie green glow of the radar scope, the sudden appearance of a target, the long minutes of silence before the kill. They remembered flying through cloud banks, unseen by all but their instruments, stalking prey like a panther in fog. In 1945, one pilot wrote home, "We never fired unless we were sure. And when we did, they didn't come back." Today, few P-61s survive. A handful remain in museums, their black paint faded, their wings silent. But their story lives on in the minds of those who understand how technology, bravery, and innovation came together in the darkest hours of war. The Black Widow was never flashy. It was never loud. But in the war for the night sky, it didn't need to be. It just needed to be unseen.